The hospital loomed before me, its dark silhouette casting an eerie shadow against the fading twilight. The building stood isolated, surrounded by an expanse of overgrown trees, and a sense of desolation that sent shivers down my spine. I glanced at my dad, his face etched with a mixture of determination and unease. "Are you sure this is the right place?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. The stories I had heard about the hospital were unsettling, to say the least. Rumors of strange occurrences, unexplained disappearances, and a general feeling of dread that hung in the air like a heavy fog. My dad nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "It's the only place left that can take us," he replied, his voice tinged with resignation. I had been feeling uneasy about this decision ever since he had told me we were moving to this remote town, to this bizarre hospital that seemed to defy explanation. As we entered the hospital's parking lot, I couldn't help but notice the eerie lack of other vehicles. It was as if the place was deserted, abandoned by all except for the two of us. I glanced at the building once more, its windows dark and foreboding, and a feeling of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. We stepped out of the car and gathered our belongings, making our way to the entrance. The automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit lobby that seemed frozen in time. The walls were adorned with faded paintings, the furniture draped in dusty sheets. It was as if the hospital had been stuck in a state of suspended animation. A reception desk stood at the center of the room, and a woman with tired eyes sat behind it, shuffling through papers. Her gaze met mine briefly before flickering back to her work. "Welcome to Havenbrook Hospital," she said, her voice monotone. "How can I help you?" My dad cleared his throat, his expression tense. "We're here to see Dr. Bennett," he replied. "We're the new residents." The woman's lips twitched into a faint smile, her gaze finally leaving the papers to meet my dad's eyes. "Ah, the new residents," she mused, her voice carrying an odd note of amusement. "Follow me, please." We followed her down a dimly lit hallway, the overhead lights flickering sporadically. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant hum of machinery and the distant echo of footsteps. I felt a knot of unease forming in my chest, a sense that something was profoundly off about this place. Dr. Bennett's office was as peculiar as the rest of the hospital. The walls were adorned with strange diagrams and charts, symbols that I couldn't decipher. The doctor himself was a tall, thin man with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through to the very core of me. He greeted us with a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Havenbrook," he said, his voice smooth and calculated. "I understand that you have some questions about our unique living arrangements." My dad hesitated, exchanging a wary glance with me. "Yes, we were told that we'll be living here in the hospital. But my daughter isn't sick. Why would we need to live in a hospital?" Dr. Bennett's smile remained fixed as he leaned back in his chair. "Havenbrook Hospital offers a special program for families like yours. A chance for a fresh start, a new beginning. You see, we believe that the environment here can be quite beneficial, even for those who aren't physically ill." His words sent a chill down my spine, and I fought the urge to shudder. Something about his demeanor, his unwavering gaze, set me on edge. It was as if he knew something that he wasn't sharing, something that went beyond the surface. "We've prepared a room for you," Dr. Bennett continued. "It's quite comfortable, and you'll have all the amenities you need. You'll find that living here can be quite enlightening." I exchanged a glance with my dad, my unease mirrored in his eyes, but it seemed that we had little choice in the matter. We were in a new town, in a new situation, and this strange hospital was our new reality. The room we were led to was surprisingly spacious, its walls adorned with soothing pastel colors and serene landscapes. But there was an oddness to the atmosphere, a feeling that something was off-kilter. The air felt heavy, as if it carried secrets that were waiting to be uncovered. My dad unpacked our belongings while I stared out the window, my thoughts swirling like a storm. There was an unsettling feeling settling in my gut, a feeling that we had entered a place where the normal rules of reality no longer applied. What kind of hospital had families living in it? And why did I get the distinct sense that there was more to this place than met the eye? As the evening wore on, I found myself unable to shake the feeling of being watched. The walls seemed to whisper, the floorboards creaking under footsteps that weren't my own. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but the sense of unease persisted, growing stronger as the night deepened. When bedtime arrived, I climbed into bed, my thoughts a chaotic mess. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of a bedside lamp, casting elongated shadows across the walls. I tried to close my eyes and drift off to sleep, but every little noise seemed to echo in the silence, every rustle of the sheets making me jump. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, like the susurrus of leaves in the wind. My heart raced as I strained to listen, my senses on high alert. The whisper seemed to be coming from just beyond my room, a soft, unintelligible murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. I considered waking my dad, telling him about the strange sounds, but I hesitated. What if I was just imagining things? What if I was letting my fear get the best of me? I buried my head under the pillow, trying to shut out the noises, to convince myself that I was safe. But as I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The hospital, with its strange program and eerie atmosphere, was becoming more unsettling by the minute. And as I finally managed to drift off to sleep, the whispering followed me into my dreams, a haunting reminder that this place held secrets that I had yet to uncover. The days in the hospital passed in a haze of unease. The routines were strange, the interactions with staff even stranger. Each day seemed to blur into the next, the hospital's corridors becoming a labyrinth of confusion and disorientation. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this place than met the eye, that the hospital itself held a secret that I was meant to uncover. I found myself wandering the hallways during my free time, my footsteps echoing against the cold linoleum floors. The hospital seemed to be filled with locked doors, rooms that were off limits to residents like me. The staff's responses were evasive when I asked about them, only adding to the growing sense of mystery that surrounded this place. One day, as I explored a particularly dim corridor, I stumbled upon an open door. The room beyond was empty, its walls adorned with faded wallpaper and peeling paint. But what caught my attention was the table in the center of the room, a table covered in old, weathered books. Curiosity getting the better of me, I stepped inside, my fingers brushing against the spines of the books. They seemed to be a mishmash of genres, medical texts, old novels, and volumes on the occult. The sight sent a chill down my spine, the juxtaposition of subjects adding to the eerie feeling that this room held a deeper purpose. As I flipped through the pages of one of the books, my eyes landed on a passage that made my heart race. It spoke of the hospital's history, of its origins as a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead were blurred, where experiments were conducted in the pursuit of knowledge that defied the natural order. I felt a mixture of disbelief and horror as I read on, the words on the page painting a picture of a hospital that was far from benevolent. The hospital's founder, Dr. Edgar Havenbrook, had been a man obsessed with unlocking the secrets of life and death, and he had used the hospital as his laboratory. As I continued to delve into the passages, I learned of the experiments that had taken place, the attempts to communicate with the beyond, the rituals that had been performed in the dead of night. It was a disturbing revelation, a glimpse into a history that had been hidden from the public eye. But the most chilling part was yet to come. The book described a ritual that was said to open a doorway between the realms, allowing spirits to cross over into the world of the living. It required a sacrifice, a willing participant who would serve as a conduit for the spirits to enter our world. My heart raced as the pieces began to fall into place. The strange living arrangements, the locked rooms, the whispers in the corridors. It all pointed to something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. The hospital wasn't just a place for families to live. It was a place where the boundaries between life and death were manipulated, where dark forces were at play. As the days turned into weeks, I became consumed by my investigation. I delved into the hospital's history, unearthing more disturbing details with each revelation. I discovered the truth about Dr. Edgar Havenbrook's experiments, the sacrifices that had been made in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized that I was being watched. The staff's smiles grew colder, their gazes more calculating. I began to receive strange messages. Notes slipped under my door, warnings scrawled in cryptic symbols. It was as if the hospital itself was fighting to keep its secrets hidden, as if it knew that I was a threat to its dark agenda. One night, as I was poring over old documents in the hospital's archives, I felt a presence behind me. I turned, my heart pounding, and came face to face with Dr. Bennett. His smile was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating expression that sent a shiver down my spine. "You've been quite curious, haven't you?" he said, his voice dripping with a sinister edge. I clenched my fists, my fear mingling with anger. "What is this place? What are you doing here?" Dr. Bennett's eyes bore into mine, his gaze unyielding. "Havenbrook Hospital is a place of discovery, a place where boundaries can be crossed. You've stumbled upon truths that you were never meant to know." My mind raced as I backed away from him, my heart racing. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was in danger, and this hospital was far more sinister than I had ever imagined. I needed to find a way to expose the truth, to stop whatever dark forces were at play before it was too late. As I continued my investigation, I uncovered a hidden room deep within the hospital, a room filled with arcane symbols and ritualistic tools. It was clear that the hospital's dark past was far from over, that the rituals that had been performed by Dr. Havenbrook were still being carried out by those who believed in his twisted vision. With each passing day, I felt the hospital's grip on me tighten, its influence seeping into my very being. I knew that I was running out of time, that the forces at play were closing in on me. But I was determined to expose the truth, to reveal the darkness that lurked within these walls. The days turned into a relentless cycle of fear and determination. I spent my nights poring over documents and researching arcane rituals, my days filled with a constant awareness of the shadows that seemed to follow me wherever I went. The hospital had become a prison of secrets, a place where reality and the supernatural intersected in terrifying ways. My investigations led me to a group of individuals who shared my suspicions about the hospital. We gathered in secret, united by our determination to uncover the truth and put an end to the dark practices that had plagued this place for far too long. Our research led us to a ritual that, if performed correctly, would close the doorway that had been opened by Dr. Havenbrook's experiments. The ritual was complex and dangerous, requiring a level of precision and knowledge that only the most determined could achieve. As the group planned our strategy, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The hospital's influence was growing stronger, its malevolent presence seeping into every corner of my existence. One night, as the moon hung low in the sky and a feeling of foreboding settled over the hospital, we gathered in the hidden room that held the tools of our salvation. The atmosphere was tense, our breaths shallow as we prepared to perform the ritual that could save us from the darkness that threatened to consume us. The incantations were spoken, the symbols drawn with a precision born of desperation. The air grew thick with energy, the room crackling with an otherworldly power. And then, as we reached the climax of the ritual, a bone-chilling scream echoed through the room, a wail that seemed to come from the very depths of the hospital itself. The walls shook, the symbols on the floor glowing with an unnatural light. The doorway between realms began to flicker, the boundary wavering as if it couldn't decide whether to close or remain open. The hospital itself seemed to rebel against our actions, fighting to maintain the grip it had on the world of the living. But we persisted, our determination outweighing the malevolent forces that sought to keep us in their clutches. The energy in the room surged, our voices rising in unison as we chanted the final words of the incantation. And then, with a deafening roar, the doorway collapsed in on itself, a whirlwind of energy dissipating into nothingness. The room fell silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. We exchanged glances, a mixture of relief and exhaustion evident in our eyes. We had succeeded in closing the doorway, in putting an end to the dark practices that had plagued the hospital for so long. But our victory was short-lived. As we left the hidden room, we were met with a sight that filled us with dread. A group of hospital staff, their eyes glazed over with an otherworldly light. Dr. Bennett stood at the forefront, his once calm demeanor replaced by a frenzied fanaticism. "You've disrupted the balance," he spat, his voice tinged with madness. "You've condemned us all!" The staff moved toward us, their movements robotic and unnatural. It was clear that the hospital's influence had taken hold of them, twisting their minds and turning them into pawns of a malevolent force. Panic surged through me, the realization dawning that our actions had triggered something far more dangerous than we had anticipated. With a sense of urgency, we retreated, our steps echoing through the corridors as we ran for our lives. The hospital seemed to come alive, its walls shifting and morphing, its very essence becoming a trap from which there was no escape. The staff pursued us relentlessly, their eyes devoid of humanity, their movements fueled by an otherworldly determination. We navigated the twisting hallways, our breaths coming in ragged gasps as we sought refuge in the labyrinthine corridors. Every door we tried was locked. Every escape route seemed to lead us further into the heart of the hospital's darkness. It was as if the building itself was conspiring against us, a sentient entity determined to keep its secrets hidden. As we ran, I couldn't help but think of the sacrifices that had been made within these walls, the lives that had been twisted and contorted in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The hospital had become a nexus of malevolence, a place where the boundaries between life and death had been shattered, and where the consequences of those actions were coming to fruition. With each corner we turned, the hospital seemed to shift and change, its layout becoming a twisted maze that defied logic. The staff's pursuit was unrelenting, their numbers growing as if the very walls were birthing them. We were outnumbered, outmatched, and running out of options. But then, in a stroke of luck or perhaps fate, we stumbled upon a room that seemed different from the rest. The air within was charged with an energy that felt both ancient and powerful. Symbols adorned the walls, symbols that were similar to the ones we had used to close the doorway. It was as if this room held a connection to the very heart of the hospital's darkness. As the staff closed in, we had no choice but to enter the room, hoping that whatever lay within could offer us sanctuary or a means of escape. The symbols seemed to react to our presence, glowing with an eerie light that bathed the room in an otherworldly glow. With a surge of desperation, we began to chant, our voices rising in unison as we invoked the power of the symbols. The room vibrated with energy, the air crackling with an intensity that was almost palpable. And then, with a blinding flash, the symbols erupted in a burst of light, consuming us in its brilliance. The hospital seemed to shudder, a cacophony of screams and unearthly wails filling the air as if the very building itself was protesting against our actions. And then, as the light subsided, we found ourselves standing outside the hospital, the building itself nowhere to be seen. We exchanged bewildered glances, our breaths still heavy from the ordeal. The hospital had vanished, as if it had never existed. And as we stood there, surrounded by the open sky and the distant lights of the town, a sense of closure washed over us. The darkness had been defeated. The malevolent force that had haunted those corridors had been banished. But the scars of our experience remained, a reminder that some boundaries should never be crossed, that some knowledge is better left undiscovered. The hospital had been a place of horror and manipulation, a place where the boundaries between life and death had been twisted beyond recognition. As we walked away from the place that had held us captive, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mixed with a lingering unease. The hospital's secrets had been exposed, its darkness vanquished, but the memories of our time within its walls would forever haunt us. And as we looked back at the empty space where the hospital had once stood, a chilling thought settled in the pit of my stomach. Some secrets are best left buried, some boundaries are best left untested, and some horrors are better left forgotten. Our escape from the hospital marked the end of a nightmare, but the echoes of our experiences would remain with us for the rest of our lives. The town's residents were left with confusion and shock, unable to comprehend the disappearance of the hospital that had stood for generations. Some believed it was a natural disaster, while others suspected a government cover-up. For us, the truth was a burden we carried in our hearts. We knew the horrors that had unfolded within the hospital's walls, the malevolent forces that had manipulated reality itself. It was a truth that we could never fully share with the world, a truth that would forever cast a shadow over our lives. In the days that followed our escape, we received messages from others who had been trapped in the hospital's grasp, survivors who had managed to evade the hospital staff's clutches, who had felt the pull of the darkness and fought against it. Together, we formed a network of support, a group bound by the shared experience of confronting the unknown. As we pieced together the events that had transpired, we uncovered more about the hospital's history. Dr. Havenbrook's twisted experiments, the sacrifices made in the name of forbidden knowledge. It was a legacy of darkness that had spanned generations. Our group vowed to ensure that the hospital's secrets remained buried, that its influence would never resurface. But the trauma lingered, manifesting in sleepless nights and haunted dreams. The hospital had left an indelible mark on our minds, a scar that couldn't be erased. We tried to move on, to rebuild our lives, but the memories of our time within its walls continued to haunt us. As time went on, we found solace in each other's company, in the shared understanding of the horrors we had faced. We used our experiences to advocate for change, to shed light on the dangers of unchecked pursuit of knowledge and the manipulation of the natural order. Our group became a beacon of awareness, a force for good in a world that often turned a blind eye to the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. Years passed, and the town began to heal from the shock of the hospital's disappearance. But for us, the wounds remained fresh, a reminder of the boundary we had crossed and the darkness we had confronted. We carried the weight of that experience with us, a burden that we would forever bear. And as I look back on those days, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if we had never stumbled upon the hospital, if we had never delved into its secrets. Would our lives have been different? Would we have been spared the horrors we faced? It's a question that lingers in the back of my mind, a question that will never truly have an answer. But what I do know is this: some boundaries should never be crossed. Some knowledge is better left undiscovered. The hospital was a reminder of the consequences of meddling with forces beyond our comprehension, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge can lead to darkness and despair. And as the years go by, I find solace in the strength of our group, in the bond we share, and the purpose we've found in preventing others from falling victim to the same horrors. The hospital's legacy lives on through us, a testament to the dangers of crossing boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. In the end, our experiences within the hospital's walls shaped us into individuals who would forever respect the unknown, who would forever tread cautiously when faced with the mysteries of the world. The horrors we faced were a reminder that some things are best left untouched, some boundaries are best left untested, and some secrets are better left buried in the darkness.